This video will show you how to replace the front outer tie rod end on a Ford Edge. This is part of your front steering and suspension, located behind your front wheels. Let's get into it. A quick note about this repair: when it's done, you're going to need a four-wheel alignment. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front end of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. Once you've completed that, we're going to start removing the wheel. If you have a center cover, go ahead and remove that first. Typically, you're going to find a small slot that you could carefully pry in. For this, I'm just using a small pry bar. Once you've removed that, you're going to remove all 5 of your 19mm lug nuts, and then we can remove that wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a clear view of our tie rod ends and our power steering rack bellows boot. In between the inner tie rod end and the outer tie rod end, you're going to find a 24mm jam nut. We're going to be turning this clockwise, bringing it down the threads just far enough that it separates from the outer tie rod end. You're going to find that there's an area on the outer tie rod end that you can use a 7/8 or 22mm wrench to hold. We'll use our 24mm wrench for the jam nut. Once again, we're turning that jam nut clockwise. We're moving to the outer tie rod end mounting hardware next. Typically, you're going to find a cotter pin of some sort. Go ahead and remove that. We'll set that aside for disposal. Continuing on, we're going to remove our mounting nut. We're using an 18mm for our tie rod mounting nut. Now that I have this broken free, I'm leaving it on the stud, just a couple threads here. We'll start separating the outer tie rod end from the steering knuckle. Now to separate this, if you do not have a tie rod end separator tool, you could carefully use a hammer. A quick note about this: be extremely careful around your ABS sensor and wire. And you also want to be careful not to cause any damage. We're tapping directly on the knuckle here. You could also carefully tap along the top of the mounting nut in this area. Let's start removing the outer tie rod end from the inner tie rod end. When we start turning the outer tie rod end counterclockwise, count the amount of turns it takes to remove it. One, two, and so on. I had 18 turns. Your results may vary. Now it's time to install our brand new outer tie rod end. When you go to install the outer tie rod end, we want to make sure that we start it on, and then we're going to install it by turning it clockwise the same amount of turns as it took to remove it. Okay, it started on. Now along the back side of the knuckle, we're going to attach our outer tie rod end to the knuckle. We'll carefully pivot things as necessary so we can align them. Start on our mounting nut. On this application, we do have a castle nut, which means it has slots. If you were looking at the tie rod stud, you're going to find a port leading through it. Go ahead and snug this up. Torque it to 35 foot-pounds, and then we'll make sure we can install our locking cotter pin. Now when we look at this, we're attempting to make sure we have our slot aligned with the port on the tie rod end. If it's not aligned, continue tightening until the very next slot is, and then install that locking cotter pin. Now since mine is not fully aligned, I'm just going to continue tightening as I mentioned. Let's continue on to reinstalling our jam nut. We're turning this counterclockwise until it bottoms out against our outer tie rod end. Let's make sure that that's snug. I'm going to be using my 22 or 7/8 wrench and my 24 wrench to make sure this is nice and tight here. There we are. One last quick inspection in this area and we can reinstall our front wheel. Once you have all 5 lug nuts on there, we're going to bottom them out in a crisscross manner. We'll get the wheel safely on the ground and then torque each of the lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds. Now I have the wheel back on the ground. Let's go ahead and torque these to that 100 foot-pounds. Torqued. If you have a center cover, install that now. When we install the center cover, we'll make sure that our lug nuts align with the corresponding ports here. Press it in, double check to make sure it's secured all the way around. Okay friend, we finished our installation. Now the next thing you want to do is make sure you pump up the brake pedal till it's firm. After that, take your vehicle for a road test, you're listening for any odd noises, and then get yourself an alignment. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.